Hello, my friend, and welcome to Beyond, the personal growth podcast for the people who are healing beyond their conditioning and beyond the cycles that played out before them. My name is Katie Lynn, and with 20 years of experience in the field of psychology and human behavior, I am bringing my natural curiosity, expertise, and personal life experiences here for discussions that are guaranteed to be informative, inspiring, and entertaining. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Today on the podcast, I have an incredible expert. Her name is Hilaria Larriva, and she is a microdose coach with deep roots in her Mayan ancestry, guiding nearly 1,000 clients over the past 7 years on their healing journeys. She specializes in helping individuals reconnect with themselves through the intentional use of microdosing, drawing on both modern insights and ancient practices. Hilaria blends her cultural heritage with cutting-edge techniques to facilitate personal growth and emotional healing. Her approach is holistic, empowering her clients to unlock new levels of clarity, balance, and self-awareness. Through her work, Hilaria has become a trusted resource for those seeking transformation and deep healing. Hilaria, welcome to Beyond. Thank you so much for being a guest. I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Ooh, I'm so excited because I'm a fan of this show. So likewise.
Yeah. So I would love for you to begin this dialogue with how you arrived in this space of healing and these particular modalities and this blend of your heritage, your cultural understanding, and these technologies via plants.
My family on my dad's side, because I'm Mexican American and my dad's side is the Mexican side. So my family is originally from this city called Merida in southern Mexico. It's in the Yucatan Peninsula. And I've always just kind of been brought up in a way that we have these really ancestral roots and that we've come to the Los Angeles area and have transformed and honored all of these beautiful traditions, but also just evolving as well. So that's also something that's been just very near and dear to my heart. And I've been really lucky just to be connected through just community that I've been able to learn even further how some of these specific healing modalities work at a younger age. And then I just kind of decided to, I guess, explore on my own too, which led me down a lot of wonderful paths and interesting ones, to say the least.
Yeah, there's so many ways to take this, right? And I feel like there's this really fascinating and beautiful, I don't think it's a resurgence, but just greater awareness around healing modalities and plant medicine and things like that, where there's more curiosity than ever, I think. There's more research than ever in terms of cognitive health and emotional health and how these modalities can really empower us as individuals on our healing journeys. And then there's also a lot of stigma and taboo still that we can run into. And I think when I was driving earlier, I was like, when was my first ceremony? And I think it was actually 2017.
Okay.
And I remember being connected. It was sort of like a person who knows a person who knows a person
Yeah.
that facilitates, right? And
Yeah.
understandably so, because it is still very new to the majority of people that are walking the world at this point in America, let's say. When I heard about it, I was very intrigued, right? Because I have my roots in psychology. I love human behavior. I love brain development. I'm such a geek for it. And I had started to explore the research around how powerful this has been in terms of just healing different, not just healing depression and anxiety and things like that, but also in terms of mindset and recreating new neural pathways. And so a friend of a friend of a friend, helped me access my first ceremony, but there was a lot of fear around it because I didn't really understand what was happening or what was going to go on from a scientific perspective. So can you give us a bit more insight about how this works scientifically?
Definitely. So I work specifically a lot with psilocybin and that comes in the form of mushrooms. And I I'm like you. I love to learn all about the science part because I think there's sometimes, even though there is more information out there, there's still a lot of it that just goes completely over everybody's head. So I try my best to kind of translate all that science and study all these scientific journals and data. And the best way to describe this in terms of science, we'll start off with like a metaphor. I like to say our brain is like a house and it has all these different rooms, it has all these different hallways, all the different cupboards, drawers, all these things like that. And unfortunately, sometimes when trauma happens, which it has happened to all of us, regardless of how big or small or when it happened, our brain and bodies specifically shut down parts of the brain to protect us from those experiences. I'm not saying literally shutting it down where you're not able to function, but it does shut down these neural pathways and it does decrease neurotransmitters that make you feel sometimes feeling depressed, feeling anxious, feeling dull, and just feeling in this place of like lullness. So when using something like psilocybin that is very amazing at creating neural pathways and boosting neurotransmitters, it's basically like when you ingest psilocybin, these lights in your house start to go on. So your hallway light turns on, your laundry room turns on, and you can actually see then what's in your house. And then you can actually start to do a deep cleaning. And so sometimes that's why when people have maybe done talk therapy for a decade, which I think is great. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just also just a part of the healing process is that sometimes we can talk in circles about that same thing. But if we can actually start to open up these pathways for us to enter these spaces to actually deal with it, that's simply kind of how the science of it works in terms, and I like to say English.
Yeah.
But if we want to throw some scientific terms in there, it's about saying we're using the house metaphor again. And if we have our house and the lights are the neurotransmitters opening up, when we ingest psilocybin goes through this elimination process in our body, specifically a lot of the times in the liver area, and it kind of sloughs off this like this phosphate molecule. And so psilocybin turns into something called psilocin. And a lot of people don't know what psilocin is. It's a part of psilocybin. It's a molecule within psilocybin, and that's the part that holds all the hallucinogenic aspects of this plant. And once we're in the stage of psilocin, psilocin then has to connect to a very specific serotonin receptor. And I know a lot of people hear about serotonin and all of that, and everybody wants more serotonin released in the brain, but we have to connect to a very specific serotonin receptor because I like to call it the mood molecule. It's where it shows and informs our body how to react to things in happy times and also even sad times too. It's regulating. So once that psilocin connects to a serotonin to a receptor specifically, that's when these neural pathways are opening. That's when these neurotransmitters are more enhanced. That's kind of the science aspect. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yes.
I love the science aspect because for me personally, the understanding is such a huge component to my receptivity, right? So if I can understand and better learn how something functions or like what it's going to do, then I can be more open to the potential healing available or the possibilities or understand even just how to navigate what I'm getting myself into, and that doesn't just go for like ceremony, that goes for everything in my life. I'm like, oh, I want to go learn more about this because I feel like I'm going to step into it, or I want to dive deeper into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's so important and valuable to know the science aspect. And even if you don't understand all of the science aspect, because there's a lot of like interesting terms, and
Sure.
it's kind of hard to digest, but that's why I really tried my best to take the time to learn these things and find a way to actually, I think, explain it to people in a way that they're able to comprehend and understand it, and it doesn't feel like it's out of reach. Because when we feel things are out of reach, we don't go towards it because it's kind of scary,
It's
and
overwhelming.
Yeah, and
it's a different language.
Exactly, and even just the outcome that you get from working with this type of medicine is also can be overwhelming too. So it's like if you can decide for yourself that you want to know all of the knowledge you possibly can, it makes things less scary. And you feel more empowered in your healing. You're taking responsibility and accountability for your healing too, of not just being like, oh, this shaman told me to do this at this time of the evening because the moon is out perfectly at this hour. And, but you have no idea why. You're just kind of saying, okay, I'll do it, and I think it makes the process of healing just way more abundant and fulfilling, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I really appreciate so much about what you're doing and what you're bringing forward in this space is because you really have such a strong emphasis on education, and not education from the perspective of like, read these 6 research papers. And like, I remember when you sent me a video to watch when you were creating your program and things like that. And I was so excited. I was literally like smiling and jumping up and down because it was so digestible, and it was like, oh, this is really, because you can go down a rabbit hole, especially in the online space, and just receive all kinds of stuff. And then you got to figure out how to disseminate like what's accurate and what's not and all of that. And I'm like, it's so amazing that we have practitioners and professionals now that are stepping forward to put this in a way where we can have a trusted source of knowledge and information so that we can make really empowered, like you said, informed decisions around how we're going to really step into our healing and be an active participant. And unfortunately, like part of the reason that I was so excited about this episode is because I am such a firm believer in like ceremonies and really ancient modalities for healing. But also, I've heard so many stories that are really unfortunate and probably could have been examples of situations and ceremonies playing out differently had people been more educated, had they had a really grounded and well-practiced facilitator and expert by their sides to like guide the whole process, And so like whenever I'm asked about, what do you think about me doing this ceremony? What do you think about me doing this, medicine? My stance is always, vet your facilitators, vet your practitioners. And now I feel so excited because I'm like, go message Hills. Go send them, go see Holy Rebel and what Holy Rebel is all about. I love that resource is available now because it's really a beautiful modality and it's so powerful. So do you have like a favorite story of like somebody who went on this journey and like where they started and what their experience was and like what the outcomes are? Because I would love to paint that picture for somebody who's new to this space.
Totally. And I also, at some point too, I want to add something to what you were talking about, just irresponsible people offering ceremonies. But
yes, of course.
So I love to tell this story because he was one of my earlier on clients. I won't say his name, but if he listens, he knows who he is. Because I tell him, I go, you're my example.
That's awesome.
Of what not to do.
Okay.
So, because I think this is the point too, and even kind of just piggybacking off of what you were just kind of saying. So I worked with this client. We've been working together now on and off for, I think, like about 6 years or so now. And he had just moved to Los Angeles when I first met him. And I remember when I met him and he came and he pulled up and he kind of had, I think he just had like a rental car or something because he was just like kind of getting on his feet at the time. And he was really interested in macro dosing. And I was like, okay, well, this is, if you intend on doing that, this is what you kind of need to do to prepare yourself in terms of like finding a space that you feel completely safe in. And because he wanted to do it on his own. And I'm totally for that if you are able to be responsible, and I had been working with him prior, even just for a little while, maybe like a few months, just doing microdosing. And then he wanted to take the next step into a macrodose experience. And so I told him, I go, find a safe place. I always recommend really for people to do it in their homes because a lot of times you want to relax and maybe just lay in your bed. You know that you're safe in your home. There's nobody that's going to enter your home that you don't know, or maybe your spouse is there with you. Like just these things that to set yourself up for the most success. have water, be properly mineralized and everything prior. And I told him all these things that were necessary to have a good, safe, and abundant experience. And I had told him the dose that he should be taking, and he did not listen to me on that part. And when I got a call from him later in that evening, where he said that he had taken more than I had suggested, because I said, do not take more than this amount. I mean, if he were to have done that, he would have been okay, but he was not prepared to do that. And when I received that call and he said that he had taken more than I had suggested, he had taken the amount that I told him not to do, he was like, I'm feeling a lot of things. And I go, okay, well, this is the moment now for you to just remind yourself that you will be okay. But this is also the choice that you're making in taking. This is not something that you mess around with. I wasn't trying to scold him or anything, but
Sure.
I'm trying to prepare him that the ride is about to twist and turn a little bit right now. So
Yes.
And then I got a call from him, and then he said, okay. He's like, okay, Hills, thank you. I'm just going to breathe through this and just go there. And I was like, okay. I was like, you got this. I know you can do this. And then I got a call from him the next day, and he was like, I should have listened to you. He goes, but it was also the best experience of my life, too.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's like, and he's also now become on the Forbes fortune list, I think. And he's started his own companies, and he's married with a baby now, and he's done a lot of startup companies, and it's really beautiful to see him win. But I also like to kind of tell people, I know people want like a story of like, oh, they went through this and it was like this magical experience. But this is also, healing is not necessarily always beautiful.
For sure.
In fact, it's actually most of the time not beautiful,
Yes.
not when you're in it.
Yes.
And this is also just saying, like, kind of when you decide not to listen to people that are kind of giving you the best advice you could possibly have in an experience like that. But still, then he was able to strap himself in, so to speak. And because I think we also did work together for a few months prior, that he was preparing himself in a way. And it's almost like when your client kind of takes a leap a little too soon, and some of them make it and some of them don't. But fortunately, he was one to have made it.
That's amazing. Wow. There's so much in what you just shared that I'm like, I mean, how often do we, I'm going to put myself in this category too, just decide that like we know better? Like, oh, we know better. And the thing that I love about like ceremony and particularly like plant medicine is nature. Nature's going to give you what you need.
Oh, yeah.
Nature is not interested in what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And the wisdom in nature is so far beyond, I think, what we have access to consciously. And like we are nature, so we have access to it. However, there is this real thing around like limits in terms of like mindset and capacity and perception and bias. And so I feel like nature is only ever always operating in complete truth. And I love that you shared that, healing can get messy or uncomfortable, because I have yet to have a ceremony that is like magical butterflies and sparkles and like this happy, super experience, right? Like I feel like when I sit with myself in these spaces, it has always been intense for me. And I've never come out and been like, that was so pleasant, and at the same time, like the wisdom that has come through as a result of my ceremonies has informed so much, like years later. And I remember like giving birth to Ezra, our littlest one, and the medication didn't work, right? I was like, I want an epidural, and then the epidural like did not work at all. So I basically had like a full on natural birth, which was incredible and also not on my agenda. And so nature, right? Nature will give you what you need, not what you want. But I remember in that moment, finally understanding what a couple of my ceremonies were trying to teach me and prepare me for. And it was really that surrender. It was really that level of trust in the body, trust in the experience, and surrender at a different level than I was ever willing to. And so this story wraps up so much for me around like Yes, this is exactly like the power in it, right? Because it really, I could see how his human impulse was to like override your advice, right?
Mhm.
And take his own journey. And
Yeah.
also how that probably really connected him. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but just as an observer, like I would imagine it probably connected him more to his ability to trust himself and hold himself through discomfort and through uncertainty, which then probably allowed him to create so much success going forward. Because I tell my clients, like, the barrier to entry for success is how you be with uncertainty, because there's so much of it, right? Like it comes in boatloads when you're building
Mhm.
something, right? So thank
Oh,
you for
yeah.
sharing that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just also something to just again tag on to what you were just saying. It's Mother Nature, and maybe this isn't the best term, but this is kind of how I view her with so much reverence and respect when I say this. Is
Mhm.
like she is the greatest serial killer of all time.
For sure.
You know,
For
she
sure.
wipes out, you know, territories, human
Yes.
ecosystems when at her whim.
Yes.
And so it's like when we decide to ingest something as an extension of her in us, there's that point of you have to be like, oh, my ego, my ways of
Yes.
thinking, my programming, it just dissolves.
Yep.
And so it's like rubbing up against everything that you've told yourself to survive in life up until
Sure.
this point just goes and
Yes.
can be catastrophic in a way, but then also the renewal part of it of just feeling so like it's almost like you just broke yourself out of jail,
Oh, yeah.
where you're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, I don't actually have to do that. I don't have
Yes.
to behave that way. I don't have to go to these thoughts anymore. But that's also that point afterwards is amazing, but then you also have to actually integrate it too,
Yes. Yes.
which is the big part.
Oh, it's huge. The integration is, I mean, you have the journey, right? Whether you do a micro or macro
Mhm.
experience, you have the journey. And then I feel like the real work begins in the integration, because
Oh,
now
yeah.
you're like, how do I move? Because once you know something, you can't unknow it,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like there's information that you're like, I kind of wish I could go back to the version of myself that I was before I knew this
Oh,
was
yeah. I mean,
available.
it's like you're a kid on a baseball team and you keep being like, "Put me in, coach," and then the
Yeah.
coach puts you in, and you better swing,
Yeah.
whether you
Here comes a
whether
line drive, right?
yeah, yeah, whether you hit that ball or not, like it's coming for you. So,
It's
and you'll keep
true.
swinging until you strike out, and then you get back in line all over again. That's
For
literally
sure.
what it is.
Yeah. And I have this, what you spoke to, I have this moment where I went on a vision quest, and like literally I signed up like 2 days before they were doing this whole thing. Okay. So I was like, didn't even know what I was signing up for. I had done one vision quest, I think, before, but it didn't include any ceremony or any medicine work. This one did. So we're out in the middle of nowhere. Like we're literally, it's like literally uncharted, unmapped territory. And we're out there, no cell phone service, no nothing. We got water and we got potatoes, and we're like fasted and all that kind of stuff. So we do a single day journey like by ourselves, where we take ourselves solo into a spot where you can't see any other humans, and then you're on your journey, right? And I remember sitting there and having this moment of like, if an animal approaches me right now, right? Like a puma, because there was definitely like mountain lions, pumas, like we're
Yeah.
like there was a group of men that came with us that were at a separate camp,
Mhm.
and like they had like a mountain lion walk through their camp, right? Like, and they saw it. So I'm like, this is it's possible. But if a mountain lion decides that I'm the threat, what am I going to do? Tell it I have 3 degrees? Like, I'm going to be, I'm such a good person. Like, what
Yeah.
am I going to plead? Like, I've always made the right choices, or I believe in Jesus, or
Yeah, yeah.
like I went to
Yeah, yeah.
USC and
Uh-huh.
I can heal your sister,
Yeah.
like there's nothing like it was this epiphany moment, Hills, where I was like, nature does not care about your identity
Nope.
or how good of a person you are, where you came from, how much money you have, what your social status is. Like, none of it matters.
Mhm.
And that blew my world wide open. At that point, I think after crying for a few minutes, right, at the
Mhm.
smallness of me,
Yeah.
I also then like started laughing, because I was like, this is really all just, we literally made all of this up.
Yeah.
How cute we are, to think that like I'm going to drive back into the city. All this stuff is going to matter. Like, it's like, wow, the stories
Yeah.
I've been telling myself for decades with so much emphasis and so much like attachment. Then you get into the wilderness, you get with Mother Nature and some plant medicine, and you're like, wow, I really am like an ant. And so I love that perspective because it's so true. And, you know, my husband likes to say there's no drama in nature. Like we bring the drama, we add the drama, but like a storm rolls through the forest and the storm just rolls through the forest, you know, like there is no weeping, there is no long extended grieving. It's just like it never existed. And that's wild.
Yeah. I mean, humans we kind of act like we're our own individual space operas.
We really do.
You know,
we really do. Yeah. Yeah.
And nature just has no time for that.
Nature's like, please get over yourself.
Yeah.
Like come back down to earth, literally, you know?
Absolutely.
So my question is, how might somebody know that they're ready for like this aspect of healing, this component of healing?
Well, I do like to think that it is some kind of subconscious calling. You know, I think there is this, if you're interested in it and you do feel like you keep getting pulled to it some way or another, like maybe you keep hearing like in your community or your circle of friends and family that they're talking about it, or somebody you know has done it, or you've been presented. Because even when I did my first like ayahuasca ceremony like 10 years ago, I danced around it for a long time. And I was very afraid of it, to be quite frank, just because of the stories. But I think it is initially a call. Like there's this spark, and it's not for everybody. And it's not a one size fits all too. But in terms of, I think, working with plant medicine, specifically more like mushrooms or psilocybin, I think it is this call that you have.
Yeah, I really love that you framed it as like it's like if it finds you, because that's really how I experienced it. Was like, I didn't go looking for any of this. It really found me. And then from my perspective, I was like, well, I am a healer and I want to know more about these different modalities. I want to know more about what's available. And really my intention, I think, has always been to get more curious about where my edges are and what my limits are and how I operate and where I have gaps or deficits or opportunities, you know? And so I'm a big fan of like the exploration of the inner world. And this is a huge opportunity for that. But it really did find me.
And it's not, like I said, for everybody. And that doesn't mean that somebody's not as open or, you know, or more conscious, because I hate that kind of stuff. It's just, we have to find our individual sizes of things.
For sure.
Like some of the most brilliant, open-hearted people I know have never done this before. So it's like, this doesn't necessarily make you a better person. It doesn't make you a more conscious person. It's part of your journey, or it's not part of your journey. And that's why I think it is like a calling, or an interest, or a desire, or a curiosity that just kind of keeps coming your way. Like a boomerang a little bit, you know, or you're flipping the channel, which I know we don't do anymore, but like, you know, if you're
swipe up.
Yeah, exactly. And if that person keeps coming back on your app, then I guess they're a match for you. So, and that's kind of, I think, how this works.
Yeah. I really appreciate the perspective that there's no like moral hierarchy around it, or like better than or less than, especially because I've known people who like they've sat in ceremonies and nothing has happened.
Oh yeah.
Like literally, like it's just like nothing. I sat in a ceremony once and it was with a different medicine and I was like ready, you know, I was like ready to go. I'm ready. Okay, let's do it. Nothing happened. And I had just as much dosage, just as much as everybody else that was sitting there, you know, and then it was just very clear that like, this is not for you right now. And I'm like, okay.
There's also potentially two things to that too, of what you were just sharing, because this is also not uncommon for it to happen, especially something like I've seen it many times when I used to do ayahuasca ceremonies, like close to 10 years ago, because my ex partner at the time, he was an apprentice to a shaman. And so I was kind of very heavily involved. I wasn't necessarily an apprentice myself with ayahuasca, but I was definitely, you know, my partner at the time was around it and deeply devoted and involved. So it was like, I was in some ways kind of along for the ride and learned a lot too. And witnessing people in ceremony taking the same amount as me or everybody else, or even maybe even more, and they just slept through the entire thing. So there's two things to that potentially. And it's not necessarily that it's going to be these two things, but it's highly likely. One is minerals. Most people do not talk about this at all in the plant ceremony community. And I think it's such a devastation and irresponsible thing to not talk about, but we have to really prepare ourselves, our bodies with minerals. And everybody's minerals are going to be a little wonky in just this day and age that we're living in. And the one probably we all are deficient in is magnesium, because that's our stress. That's where our cortisol starts to balance. Most of us are probably deficient in potassium as well. And it's like, but then it's all individualized too. So when that happens, I know a lot of shamans or curanderos or leaders of ceremony say you need to get on a dieta, meaning it's a diet that it's like this, typically no animal products, no sugars, no refined sugars. And it's pretty, I think, low on carbs too, if I'm not mistaken. I know some people it can go depending on protocols, but you're supposed to be like that potentially between 1 to 4 weeks prior leading up to the dieta.
Yeah.
And that's just not, I know people are going to be upset with me, but I don't care, because this is just what I think is true from the research that I've been doing and learning about minerals, is that is not the smart thing to do prior, because using plant medicines like this, they are extremely depleting in terms of minerals.
Yeah.
So it's literally detoxifying your body. I mean, especially if you're doing something like ayahuasca, like some people purge, and that's just a wave of minerals gone. And so you should probably really prepare your body prior to that. And the reason why we do these dietas is because more indigenous cultures have been operating that way, but also indigenous cultures that live in the Amazon, they have the purest forms of water still available to them that have all of the minerals possible, they have a live soil. Their food that they eat is much more rich in minerals and nutrients than what we have today. So, and they're also not they're not on the phone and the computer and being sedentary. Like, they're actually still being how human beings, I think, were initially intended to live on this earth. So one of those things of sleeping the entire time or no actual effects happening is just mineral depletion prior to it. Your body's not prepared to go to those places.
Yeah.
And then second is actually if your body can be highly inflamed, because this is a detoxifier that you're taking, really. Your body is doing everything it can right now to restore itself. So, I mean, I've seen people sleep, like I said, through ayahuasca, and it's like they wake up and they're like, wait, what happened? And we're all like kind of chatting about like, we had these profound experiences and met God and went to different dimensions and things like that. And that just wasn't the case for them. And it's like the body is trying to restore itself in those periods. So it's like sometimes what your body needed was simply just rest and restoration. So those are typically the two things I find to be like most likely to have happened in experiences like that. But it's like I said, it's not uncommon, and it does kind of work in mysterious ways sometimes that we are like, wait, I didn't realize that's kind of what I needed. Like, I wanted this profound experience, but the profoundness is sometimes just simply rest.
Yeah. And now that I think about it, as I hear you explain this, that's probably exactly what happened. It was day 3, right? And I had already sat with ayahuasca, purged a bunch, then, psilocybin, purged, did whatever that did in my system. And then day 3 was like, I was going to sit with combo. And the combo was like, nope, not at all. Nothing.
Yeah. Especially doing something like that back to back. I mean, your body was probably just, I can't obviously know for sure because we're not there and we don't have the test results and stuff like that. But it sounds like, your body probably just got zapped and was like,
sure,
I have nothing left to give you.
Good night.
Good night.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, as you explained, I'm like, that's probably exactly what happened, because I was tired and it had been a big full weekend, you know what I mean, for my body and my spirit and everything. So that's fascinating.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
And that's
really
also
appreciate that.
even with the mineral part too, of like the integration. It is so important
Mhm.
to like remineralize afterwards and be like on on a stable diet or even just taking
Mhm.
certain supplements that you need because that's going to help you integrate everything
Yeah.
that you just went through and experienced. And that's why I think sometimes you meet, and I know you've met them, I've met them, we've been around
Mhm.
them, people that have done so many ceremonies and they're just almost gone, like as
Spacing.
spacey,
Yeah.
a little airy, never grounded. And these are kind of reasons why, in terms of just not being stable with your minerals
Mhm.
and nutrients, because your body, even with you, Katie, giving birth, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Your body went
Mhm.
through an entire process of being able to form this child inside you and then
Mhm.
give birth and then also like nourish this child afterwards too for several
Yes.
months. Like you as going through even just a pregnancy, you have to take so many minerals. That's
For
why they're doing the
sure.
prenatal vitamins and making sure you're eating well and like because it's
Yeah.
like you're and that's the same thing. It's like going into an ayahuasca ceremony, doing a mushroom or psilocybin ceremony, any kind of plant ceremony. It's like think of you if you're, especially if a woman doing this, compare
Mhm.
it to that. Like you wouldn't just
No.
not do anything to prepare yourself for that
No.
event that lasts really kind of 2 years. I know they
Oh,
say
oh,
9
heck
months,
yeah.
but I
No,
mean,
it's 2 years.
it's 2 years, if not more sometimes, even with
Yeah.
postpartum and everything, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what we have to look at it more like. It's just not like, "I'm gonna have this magical weekend,
No,
and it's all
no.
gonna be dandy."
It's dandy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And really like it's so I as you say this, I'm like, of course. Yeah. Cause I was even sort of that like, well, with my first son, I was definitely the oddball, less so with our second one. But I was the one that was like, I want my placenta freeze dried. Like, I
Mhm.
want you to encapsulate, I'm gonna get this encapsulated. And my parents were like, what? You know, like because the lady who actually did both of them, that's how long she's been doing it for. She did
Oh, wow.
both boys, but they like, she came to their house and like did it in their kitchen and, and bless my parents. They're so down for like what they're so supportive. I love them so much. But it really was in service to that because even with that additional natural supplementation, it still was like a 2-year process of death and rebirth and reprogramming and re-identifying in the world. And so that's like again, I think I've said this earlier, but I'm so excited and passionate for what you've created with Holy Rebel because you are this space for people to have more knowledge, to have more proper facilitation, to really like be educated and to have support all the way around. It's so holistic, it's so empowering. So please, can you tell people where they can find you?
You can find me on Instagram if you'd like at My Holy Rebel, or you can just go to my website, which is myholyrebel.com. You're very welcome to set up like a free like phone call consultation. There's also just a lot of free like content and education videos on there, especially even on my Instagram too. A lot of free just educational content too. So if you're just even curious and just want to be a little bit of a looky loo, do a little window shopping, Holy Rebel definitely loves to share and shine.
Yeah, it's so generous of you in that way to provide so many resources and so many like videos and I like to call it edutainment, like
Yeah, ooh,
education and
I like
entertainment.
that.
I didn't come up with that, so I won't take credit. But yeah, and then you did mention I think that you might have a program coming up, so probably a good idea for people if your ears did perk as you were listening to this to follow My Holy Rebel and to get on their newsletter list and stay tuned for that because there are programs and offerings that Hills has that are just super informative, really powerful and empowering. And that's a great place to like start your journey if you feel like it's time for you to
Yeah.
step into this space.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
even currently right now, I'm doing a class called 31-Day Microdose Transformation, where it's just a 4-week class. It's online, and it's really me giving you the full rundown of how to properly microdose and teaching you all the science, the history, giving you my own just personal data of working with people from the past, 7, 8 years now, from people all the way from their 20s to even up into their 80s, from all different walks of life, and just really helping you feel super informed and confident moving into microdosing and learning how to create your own personalized protocol as well. So that's the class I'm teaching right now. And I will be doing another class before the end of the year. I haven't quite set a date on it yet, but I had a lot of people interested and people being like, oh, did I miss it? And I was like, yeah. So I feel like it's just, I'll do another one before the end of the year because it's a lot of fun and online, and you get to have your own kind of like online mycelium community of just being around other like-minded people. Because one thing that's really cool about like the clients I work with, it's like a lot of them are very gifted, highly working professionals and just really magical people,
Yeah.
and or sometimes even like just hearing people's stories is just, it's so magical and so humbling too, and just makes you recognize that we're all really connected, and just that's how kind of the mycelium network works anyway. So it's kind of cool to see it displayed like that. So yeah, that's kind of the offering I have in terms of a little program that's coming up. So just keep your eyes peeled before the end of the year. Most likely,
Yeah.
it'd be most likely November I would do it before the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, perfect timing,
Mhm.
go inward during the winter, at least
Oh,
here for us in the
yeah.
States, winter time,
Yeah. Yeah,
fall, winter.
exactly.
I love it. Thank you so much, Hills, for your wisdom and your generosity and your love. Thanks for sharing with us and educating us and just empowering us to make really beautiful choices for ourselves on our healing journey. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie. Such an honor to be on this podcast. I'm just like, oh my God, I got to be on Katie's cool podcast.
Aw.
So, I'm a fan. I subscribe and listen, and you all should too, if you don't already.
Yeah, thank you. As we complete this episode, I would love to know your insights, takeaways, and feedback. You can message me on Instagram at Katie Lynn Rojano or send them via email to katie@katielynnrojano.com. Any products or digital downloads I mentioned can be found via the link in my Instagram bio. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to share it with at least one friend and leave a 5-star review so we can get these impactful dialogues into the lives of even more people. I would also like to thank my guest for their vulnerability and generosity in allowing us to learn from them and grow alongside them. Until next time, friends, let's go beyond.